Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into a true titan of the entertainment industry. Since 1985, a single character has defined, completely redefined, and honestly, just utterly dominated the platforming video game genre. We are, of course, talking about Super Mario. But hey, this isn't just going to be a nostalgic trip down memory lane. We're going to deconstruct the exact mechanics, the massive technological leaps, and those brilliant design philosophies that have allowed this franchise to just continuously innovate over an incredible 40-year legacy.
And that brings us right to the central question we really want to answer today. How exactly does a 1985 8-bit plumber stay relevant for 4 decades without completely alienating the hardcore fanbase? Think about it for a second. Most entertainment franchises either burn out entirely, they repeat the exact same tricks until we're all bored to tears, or they change so much that they lose their original identity. Yet somehow, Mario consistently threads that needle.
Okay, let's take a quick look at our roadmap for today. We're going to cover innovation versus familiarity, breaking hardware limitations, the evolution of audio, powering up gameplay, and finally, scaling worlds and teams. All right, starting right off with Section 1, innovation versus familiarity, or what we can call the rehash versus sequel dilemma. When you look at the timeline of releases, you'll notice pretty quickly that Nintendo strategically spaces out their massive genre-defining iterations. We start out with the original Super Mario Bros. Back in '85, which basically laid the foundation for the entire 2D side-scrolling platformer genre. Then, Super Mario World in 1990 really perfects that 2D formula. Jumped in 1996, and Super Mario 64 literally invents the rules for 3D camera movement. 2007 Super Mario Galaxy completely turns gravity upside down, and then recently 2023's Super Mario Bros. Wonder just warps the traditional 2D landscape entirely. They aren't just churning out these massive shifts every single year, right? They build up anticipation and allow the actual technology to catch up to their ideas.
And this brings up a brilliant point by researcher Tommy Thompson. He notes the contrast of business pragmatism versus expressive design. See, in the video game industry, publishers obviously want safe sequels for a guaranteed profit, but that often breeds a really boring familiarity. Developers, on the other hand, crave expressive design and innovation. So Nintendo solves this dilemma by utilizing a base language of design patterns. Things like familiar gaps, valleys, and specific enemy placements so the player feels right at home. But they constantly change the verbs, meaning how Mario actually interacts with those familiar patterns.
Moving on to Section 2, breaking hardware limitations. Basically, doing a whole lot with a very little. Check out this visual leap, and keep in mind these were made for the exact same console. In the original 1985 game, the sprite uses a red overall and hat, an orange skin tone, and a green shirt, just to maximize a highly restricted color palette. But then look at Super Mario Bros. 3 just a few years later. The programmers creatively optimized their limited pixel mapping to give Mario a black shirt, red overalls, and a far more detailed face. They literally squeezed every single ounce of potential out of that hardware. And honestly, the staggering difference in memory limits over time really explains everything. Think about this. The original Super Mario Bros. Had just 32 kilobytes of memory to draw a static scene. That strict limitation meant the screen could only scroll to the right. You literally couldn't walk backwards because the game couldn't remember what was behind you. Compare that to the Wii era, which required huge amounts of data for dynamic, fully 3D backgrounds and characters all generated in real time. This unprecedented ingenuity forced early 16-bit era developers to turn those technical barriers into actual tangible gameplay mechanics. Which brings us to Section 3, the evolution of audio, going straight from 8-bit beeps to full-blown grand orchestras. The technological jump between generations here is just wild. The original NES sound chip, the 2A03, had just 5 analog channels. We're talking 2 squares, a triangle mostly for bass, a noise channel, and a basic sample channel for percussion. That's it. But then the Super Nintendo's SPC 700 chip was a massive revelation. It had 8 distinct channels and a digital signal processor that could seamlessly handle echo, reverb, chorus, and filtering. This shows exactly how legendary composer Koji Kondo suddenly gained this entire new sonic toolkit to really suspend the player's disbelief and create a much deeper, far more cinematic immersion in the game world. And this perfectly captures Kondo's entire philosophy. He wasn't just trying to write a catchy pop song to play loop in the background. He stated his main goal was identifying the game's physical rhythm, the actual speed at which Mario runs, jumps, and swims, and then composing music that perfectly matches it. He even cited the physical act of depressing the buttons on the controller as a crucial part of that rhythm.
the music and the gameplay were deeply, intrinsically intertwined. Now, this introduces a seriously fascinating concept used in the analysis of Mario's sound design, the kinetic anaphone. Basically, it's a musical representation of movement. Because the NES couldn't produce those smooth, gliding musical notes known as glissandi, Kondo instead used a floating, waltz-like triple meter to simulate Mario's altered, floaty physics in the underwater levels. The music is actively communicating to the player that the physics of the game world have just changed.
All right, on to Section 4, powering up the gameplay and really expanding Mario's arsenal. To keep the gameplay fresh, or to evolve the ludic framework, as researchers like to call it, Nintendo just constantly expanded what Mario could do. It starts out pretty simple in 1985, right? The Super Mushroom just lets you withstand one extra hit and break bricks. The Fire Flower lets you throw a bouncing projectile. But by 1988's Super Mario Bros. 3, things get crazy. The frog suit alters your swimming physics, and the Tanuki suit lets you literally fly and turn into an invincible statue. By 1990, we get Yoshi, an entirely separate creature you can ride with its own totally unique mechanics. And as we push into the 3D era, power-ups like the Rainbow Star or the Spin Drill, which lets you drill straight through a planet to the other side, completely redefine how players navigate the environment. But it wasn't just about what Mario was holding, it was about how the entire game flowed. Super Mario Bros. 3 completely revolutionized player concentration by adding branching, nonlinear overworld maps and the ability to save items in an inventory for later. Suddenly, you had strategic choices. You weren't just mindlessly moving from left to right anymore. You were making tactical decisions about exactly when to use a power-up to bypass a particularly difficult stage. Finally, we hit Section 5, scaling worlds and teams. This is the explosion of 3D development. I mean, titles like Super Mario Galaxy completely threw the old design rulebook out the window. You were no longer just running to the right edge of a flat screen. Developers were forced to build massive, spherical 3D planets. Mario is now shown from every conceivable angle, and the gravitational pull shifts dramatically depending on where you stand on the sphere. This completely redefined everything we knew about platforming physics and camera control. Now, to actually pull off a shift this massive, from mapping simple 2D sprites in a flat text plane to rendering massive 3D galaxies with fully orchestrated symphonic soundtracks, Nintendo had to drastically alter their corporate structure. They had to massively scale up their workforce, evolving from the relatively small, focused original R&D1 team into the giant Nintendo Integrated Research and Development, or IRD division. Developing a Mario game was no longer a small passion project for a handful of programmers. It was a blockbuster, movie-level production requiring highly specialized roles. So, looking back at this incredible 40-year evolution of intense hardware optimization, brilliant audiovisual synergy, and just meticulously crafted game design, it leaves us with one massive question. With the upcoming Nintendo Switch 2 arriving in 2026, what mind-bending new mechanics will developers dream up next? How are they going to balance that eternal tension between the comfortable nostalgia of the past and the uncharted potential of future hardware? Whatever it is, if the last 40 years are any indication, we are in for a truly fascinating jump.